Well, hey there, hobby homesteaders. Welcome back to Peak's Peak. My name's Lucas. We're sharing our hobbies on 38 acres in eastern Kentucky, but today is not about sharing our hobbies. Today is a product showcase. We're bringing you another product from MechMaxx that they've asked me to assemble and then demonstrate. And this is honestly a product that I didn't necessarily need. I already have one for my Kubota, but I did not have one to fit my TYM tractor. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to see how these work because I have never used one before. I've heard good things about them. I've heard bad things about them in general, but now MechMaxx has brought their own 3-point hitch backhoe to the market. So we're gonna unbox this thing, assemble it, and see what we think. Now, of course, this thing doesn't come with unboxing instructions, and it's heavy. I'm kind of looking it over to make sure I don't do anything silly and dump it over on myself. But I think what I can do is disassemble this upper rack so that I can get in here to it. I'll unwrap the backhoe and then maybe back the tractor in here and connect to it. I'm not sure if I can connect to it at this height or not, but that's kind of my game plan. If not, then I'll lift it up and take everything out from underneath it and go from there. All right, well, I didn't have the camera going, but I was getting everything organized and out of the way so that I could see where the weight is at on this. I had pulled the pin out of this side right here, which was holding it to this crate. It didn't get out of control, but it did tip over this way. And so I share that to say, be super careful because this thing's heavy and it's gonna go where it wants to go. There was no stopping it once it started to tip.
Now, I can also tell you I did not have the best approach to this right here, and it took me a long time to slowly and safely unload this backhoe off of the crate. I used some foam padding to cover the forks so that I wouldn't scratch the paint on the backhoe, but still, this thing is very unstable, and I ended up using a strap to kind of keep it from falling over. I would love to see some hooking points bolted onto this to help with unloading it from the crate. But we did manage to get it unloaded without tearing anything up or hurting anyone, so I guess that's a plus.
Well, guys, I'll tell you, things got sketchy there for a few minutes trying to get this thing unloaded off of the pallet, and I spent a substantial amount of time just trying to do that safely. But now that we have it planted on the ground and it's relatively stable, I can start going ahead and putting the rest of the things together. I can put the outriggers on and the bucket and all those things. But yeah, this is definitely something you want to take your time with and make sure you go about it safely because you could very easily get hurt.
Now, assembling these arms and putting the pins in the cylinders are as simple as looking at the picture and putting everything where it's supposed to go. But take note that we're putting these pins in and they're dry. There is no grease on them. And you probably should go ahead and grease them as you assemble them, because I got mine assembled and got ready to go test and realized that I hadn't greased anything and had to come back down and get the grease gun and grease it before I started working. as you're sliding these pins into the cylinders, you want to note that there's a hole that you need to line up with the hole on the arm so that you can put your bolt through it, and that holds the pin in place and keeps it from spinning around. It's a lot easier to drive these in the right orientation than it is to spin them once you've got them installed. Now, having the backhoe sitting down on the floor, I had a hard time getting the arm high enough to get the bucket pinned on, and I had to use a jack to tilt it so that I could get that pin in. It would probably be easier to set this backhoe assembly on some blocks up a little bit higher so that you had some room to work.
All right, guys, well, we essentially have this thing put together. I have got to put the hydraulic pump on it and fill it up with fluid, and I'll be ready to hook this thing to the tractor and try it out. Now, I'll tell you, every step of the way, this has been a difficult assembly process because it is so hard to get this thing stabilized. I've got 5 or 6 wood blocks in the floor here trying to find points that I could put under it and shim it to keep it stabilized, because when it's not fully assembled and the cylinders are free, it's just hard to get this thing to sit still and stand up straight, and it's heavy. So everything I go to do, I'm a little bit leery of and cautious and taking my time. I finally got it in a stable position here, but even at that, it was difficult to get the bucket and things put on because it's just so big and heavy. So you need to have a plan to have some help available, or several machines and jacks. And you know, I've used a cherry picker and a floor jack in this process and still feel like I didn't go about it quite the right way to handle it. So just be aware.
Now, hooking up the hoses is pretty straightforward because one of them is a larger connection than the other, so they can only be hooked up the correct way.
I've never used a standalone 3-point backhoe before, so I don't know if it's standard practice for them to have external hydraulic pump that works off of the PTO, but I like that design. I have rear remotes on my TYM, but I don't have to use that lever in the detent to make it continuous flow, and I'm not sure how all of that really works. I'm not really studied up on hydraulics. So I like this having its own reservoir and everything, and it all seems well contained in the unit. It doesn't make it bulkier or anything like that. So this 3-point backhoe will work on basically any 3-point hitch tractor that is big enough to carry it around and has 20 PTO horsepower. I definitely see some positives to this unit. It seems to be a pretty nice, pretty well-made unit. We'll find out when we get ready to put it to work, but I think I'm ready to put some fluid in this thing and then start running some tests and see how it works. So this has the hydraulic fluid recommendations right on it, and it holds 4.1 gallons of fluid. And of course you can choose the grade depending on, you know, the temperature, I guess, you know, the climate zone that you're working in. I'm probably going to put 32 in it because it's what I have here, and right now we're in some cooler temperatures anyway. So okay, I've got this PTO pump connected with the tractor, and I'm going to turn it on and slowly test it just to see if I can get these outriggers down and get this thing stabilized and lifted up to where I can start to connect it with the tractor. I've still got my hydraulic top link and stuff on the tractor, so I'm going to have to take that off Figure we might as well start with the pump and make sure that setup's gonna work.
Now, almost immediately, I recognized that with the movement of the pump, there was no way this thing was going to stay on the way that it was chained. I just did not see a way to secure it enough to keep it from working its way off of the PTO shaft.
So that's what I was worried about. So it works fine, but I was a little worried that it would slide off. And I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. I tried using this pin to kind of hold it in place, but this shaft doesn't stick out very far, and this doesn't have anything to lock it onto the PTO shaft. And also, I don't like it riding up against that hydraulic line that's in there. I've got an idea though. I think what I need to do is get me a PTO shaft extension and then fix it to where it brings it out just a little bit. And then I could actually pin it like completely in position. I had a time with this PTO hydraulic pump. And there's several reasons, one of which is if you slide this thing all the way on the PTO shaft, I have hydraulic lines, hard lines coming out of the case that rub up against this. And every time you engage or do any hydraulic movements, this pump gets under load and it twists. And when it twists, it's rubbing against those lines. I didn't want that to happen. They provide you with a chain that hooks to this eye bolt and then wraps around your 3-point arm, and that's supposed to hold this and stabilize it. But there's no locking mechanism for this to stay on the PTO shaft. So the way my tractor's made, there's no way to chain this thing solid and it not work its way off of the shaft and fall off. So what I did was I went to Tractor Supply and I picked up a couple of things to make this work. And I'm going to show you the solution I came up with. So the first thing I did was picked up this PTO shaft extension, and it doesn't need to, you don't have to put a bolt through it or anything because we're going to fix this pump to where it can't move. So it will be in place, but what this does is gives me another 1.5 inches space out away from those lines so that the hydraulic pump won't rub on those lines. The next thing that I did is I've got this hitch down here and it's got different spots that you can adjust it. And so what I did was I moved this hitch out so that I could drill me a hole in it so that I can pin this hydraulic pump exactly where it needs to be, and it will be pinned in place so it can't slide off and it can't rotate. That way I don't have to use the chain at all. We got our hole drilled in this and lined up. We put our shaft extension on there, and then I'm actually taking these pins right here are what hold your outriggers up on the backhoe when it's in storage. And when you're using it, you're not going to need these pins in there. So I fixed these pins with a little washer so that I can stick it through my hitch and then the top. And then all I have to do is drop a washer on it and stick this pin through there, and it locks it in place. So that's all the movement I can get, and that's the slack in my hitch. And on top of that, it can't pull off of the PTO shaft. We're in position, so there's really only like a 1/4 inch of play there. So that tightens all of that down. Now, I'm getting ready to go ahead and connect this to the tractor now so that I can start doing some test runs and test digging, see how this thing actually operates. But I think we got this solution down, and this is gonna work really well for this. Okay, now the next thing I have to adapt to make this work on my tractor is this top link that they provide you is apparently a Category 2 top link. Well, you know, an 8-foot backhoe a lot of times is going to be used on a compact tractor with Category 1. So I had to get me I have some of these spacers, you know, conversions or whatever you want to call them, around so that it fits my actual pin that's the size of my category 1, and I had to cut it to the right width so that it will slide inside here. So now I'll be able to put this on here and I won't have a bunch of slop. I didn't want to put this on here. You know, when you're using a backhoe, you're gonna be digging and it's gonna be flexing back and forth. Well, when you put things on that don't fit and they're loose, they're just gonna be slopping back and forth and you're gonna cause damage that way. So you've gotta have the right pieces to make all of this work. All right, well, found a good use for the seat belt. We'll hold this top link up while we kind of back in here close and get the bottom arms hooked on, and we get everything kind of lined up. So let's do this. Well, this feels pretty stable, feels pretty comfortable as far as, you know, foot space goes. In fact, you know, the seat will slide. And yeah, I think this is gonna be pretty comfortable to work with. It's a little bit bigger backhoe than what I had on the Kubota BX. And it was a trip to get all of this assembled and set up to fit my tractor, because this is a universal 3-point hitch backhoe, which means you have to find the right adjustments and settings to fit your machine. And your setup may be different than mine. If you get one of these and you have questions about how you might go about certain things, shoot me a message, shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to help you out with those things. I'm not MechMaxx tech support, but I obviously have a stake in how happy you are with your products if you're watching my videos to learn about MechMaxx. And the quality of the build, I think, seems pretty good. I'm gonna find that out when I get out and put it to work. And you know how I do things. I don't mess around. So we're gonna put it to work and find out whether it will hold up. But everything seems to be of decent quality. I don't see anything on it that looks like they really cut corners on this or that. But I did have the 2 supports that go from the top link down to the actual backhoe part itself that I am missing. So I'm not going to start using this and digging until those parts come in, and then we'll put this thing to work and test it. So we will wait for those parts to come in so we can include in this video how those go on, and then we'll be finished assembling this thing.
was actually pretty blown away with the strength and the speed of this backhoe. I think it's a great value for under $5,000. You can have a backhoe to put on your compact tractor. I think it's a great option. Guys, hope you enjoyed today's video, and until next time, get outside and enjoy God's creation because it's beautiful out here. Y'all have a good day.